This next session, we will be spending time talking about the future of pre-K-Gray EdTech. So it'll be a session that'll discuss the full spectrum of learning from early childhood to workforce skills, moderated by our very own Mujtaba from GSV, who will guide us through the discussion on the latest trends and strategies in the educational technology space.
Hey everyone, so we're gonna jump right into it. If you read the Ken, if you read cap table, morning context, the predominant narrative is that EdTech is dead. So my opening question is EdTech dead? And I'll let Ryan start.
No, I don't think so. I think EdTech has a lot to offer. If you break the two words down, right, they actually mean very different things. Ed is about providing skills and whatever other, outcome skills, etc. And the tech part of it is actually bringing efficiency to that process. So no, I don't think it's dead. I think, especially we've been talking about this whole session, the whole conference. With AI coming about, I think there's a resurgence in EdTech and what it has to offer. So no, I don't think it's dead at all.
I would agree with Ryan, and EdTech is far from dead. I think it has had a rebirth of sorts in the recent times. And it's primarily led by much better adoption across the globe, which was facilitated by the COVID pandemic. And I think some of those behavioral changes are clearly here to stay. And that is going to propel EdTech further even faster is what our hypothesis is.
And sorry Gaurav, I just wanted to add something. If you look at e-commerce, Mujtaba, the way e-commerce moved over the years, e-commerce had multiple different models, right, before it hit maturity. And it's still evolving. I think that's what we are seeing in EdTech. We are seeing the original model was the MOOC. Then you had live. Now you have hybrids. So I think it's evolving very significantly as a model.
And I think people have started talking about the definition of EdTech, right, for the first time, because everybody feels it was all online. So I think if you are learning, which means you are getting educated, and you are using tech, it will keep happening. So it will never be dead.
I think I'll just add two nuances to it. I think when mass public speaks about EdTech not being relevant or not being active, I think most of that is coming from a viewpoint of the capital markets. Whereas like the real EdTech number should be from the consumer markets. When I talk about consumer markets, unless and until there was some EdTech company whose entire rise was built on an audience which had to go off online and there was no offline end result. I think apart from those set of consumers, I have not seen a single EdTech company whose engagement has essentially dropped post-COVID. It's a very simple way. If anybody wants to check this, just go to your LinkedIn, start a poll, and basically ask, have you taken any sort of online course or a live workshop or a live cohort, or you use YouTube for learning? If anybody sees less than a 2:1 split in a yes to no, only then can we essentially say that the adoption is degrowing, not even dead. So I think in terms of consumer markets, I think I know more people than ever before, myself included, who are using resources out there on the internet to upskill and learn ourselves. So I think tech is far from dead.
There is a little bit of a philosophical take here as well. So Nelson Mandela had said that education is the most powerful weapon that we can use to change the world. I think all four of us and many of the practitioners here believe technology is the most powerful weapon that we can use to change the world of education. So as I said, it's a propelling force. It's here to stay, and it's doing a lot of good for the society in general.
So Arpit, you're running a proper SaaS company. Generally speaking, where's the tech in EdTech? Right, a lot of it is courses, online content. Where's the tech in EdTech?
So when we see tech, I think it's usually seen as features and then benefits and outcomes, right? Where is tech? I think tech is in the access it provides. So there is a farther reach through all these mediums, online and offline and hybrid. Tech is in the analytics that it provides in terms of being able to analyze data at a mass scale without the need for human intervention. Tech is at the intersection of various collaborative tools that it can enable in terms of giving access, being able to, access information based on your role. And I'm talking purely from an SIS perspective, a company that I run, Student Information System, which is basically bringing all stakeholders of a typical education ecosystem on one platform through the technology that we have built. So I think it's a lot of these goods that tech resides in.
I think the way we look at it, there are two components to it. One is a tech at pre-purchase, and then there is a tech at post-purchase, right? So pre-purchase, if you look at it, you have a platform where users are coming, they're getting registered. How are you managing those leads? Things like we have started building an AI engine to figure out whom to call. There's a lot of tech because we get close to 100,000 leads a month. Now it's difficult to call everyone. So there's a lot of tech in terms of whom to call. Post-purchase, right from starting from delivering a class, solving a doubt. So we have built a product called Bhaiya, bh.ai.ya. So it's a secondary teacher which we have built to solve a lot of students' doubt. And there's much more which we are doing in terms of helping students to figure out what to study and how to study. There's a lot of personalization. So I feel there's a lot of tech in EdTech.
Dude, you guys are amongst the largest investors in EdTech, no? You should be telling us.
I'm here to ask the question.
No. It doesn't quite work like that. What's the GSV view, man?
I think it depends on the market. I think in India, there's still huge offline problems that need to be solved, right? Higher education enrollments, quality degrees that actually get you to a job outcome. In different markets that might not necessarily be the case. So if you look at the investments we've made in India, I would say 2 or 3 of them are product first, tech first companies, more so than course companies or learning companies per se. And I mean, I'll flip that into a question in, what is EdTech delivering? Are you delivering knowledge? Are you delivering a certificate or a degree? Are you delivering a job outcome? I think that's especially relevant to test prep, right? Test prep is most people aren't going to clear JE advanced.
So we actually think we deliver none of that. And I don't think ed company can ever claim that we deliver outcomes, because the outcomes is fundamentally dependent on the person studying, right? If I sign up for a course and I don't show up at all, what outcome am I going to get? We think we are in the business of confidence, right? We think we are in the business, and for those of you who don't know, I run a company called Interview Kickstart. We help experienced engineers prepare for very tough technical interviews and build the skills required to get to Google, Facebook, Amazon in the Bay Area. We're Bay Area focused, so I may have a slight bit of a bias there. And what we've realized is what we fundamentally need to be helping people with is confidence. Come in, and confidence doesn't come overnight, right? Confidence comes from building the skills. It comes from building the knowledge. It comes from practicing. It comes from deliberate practice, right? So our view internally is that we are in the process of helping build confidence. The rest is all part of that, but if you don't build confidence in people, then they don't even go on to kind of interview or show up at those companies. So that's our own internal view. The knowledge, outcomes, all of that are a second order consequence. So
if I go to Interview Kickstart's website, you're not going to take credit for placing people at Google.
We don't actually, and that's a very good question, and it's a lesson that we learned very early, and I think that's the reason why we've been able to stay bootstrapped and profitable for 8 years. The reason is, when people come to our platform and they enroll, they go through a webinar. I actually run all webinars. We overtly tell people, that if you are coming here to get placed, don't come. If you are thinking of us as a placement platform, this is the wrong place to be. If you are looking for placements, go to a recruiting company. And I think that being very straightforward, very honest, telling people that we're not here to place you, that is what's helped us succeed. That's the reason we went into ISAs, because ISAs end up being a perverse, selection, right? So yes, you should go to our website, you should attend a webinar, and you should hear me telling you that no, this is not a recruiting company.
Gaurav, how about in test prep? What are the outcomes?
Yes, I think in test prep, let's consider it this way. We are in a business of selling hope and trust, okay? So as a company, people should trust you. And as soon as they trust you, you build hopes, right? So broadly, this is how it works, right? So, and now to keep those hopes alive, what you need to do, a student is coming for you for better scores, right? So either they come for better scores or better ranks. That's how we divide in test prep. So now to make sure that that hope is embarked again and again, they need to improve in their learning outcomes, which means need to score better. So I think, yeah, that's how. And ultimately everything in test prep, what I feel is people are doing is ultimately find a job to get settled in their career. So I feel, ultimately all of us are in a business of helping somebody to earn something.
I think I'll add two nuances to it. I think when we talk about EdTech, right? Broadly, it's a function of two kinds of markets. Like if you go and talk to rich markets, whether it is Western worlds or whether it is Tier 1 India, they might be, like you'll find a lot of people who might be learning music for fun, or there will be people who are like, in the Western world, there are a lot of people at 35 age, they'll go to a college and just do masters in psychology for the heck of it, right? That's a first world problem. Unfortunately, like we don't live in that world. The fundamental reason for anybody to study in this country is to come out of middle class, to say the least, or at least one strata above where they are or where their past generations were. That is also the reason why you see disproportionate amount of money being spent by the prior generation on the next generation's education, which is not a case in the first world economy, because then it's a discretionary item and people can pay for their own education. So I think the context matters a lot in terms of where are you essentially putting this entire definition on. On, let's say, what is the perspective, what's the contribution of tech towards it? Like I'll just take an India example, and just this is the same example between rich audiences and let's say not so rich audiences. It's a very common saying that education is a great leveler, but it's only a great leveler if it is available and cheap for everybody who wants to consume it. I'm again talking from a consumer market point, not a capital market point. I think the biggest advantage or the biggest responsibility of technology in delivering education is, now whether some brand does it or whether some trainer does it individually or there's a cohort who does it, but it's to make it available and cheap for everybody possible. And that is the reason I say that the greatest edtech startup in the world is nobody else but YouTube. So I think that's the fundamental definition, like making that phrase of education being a leveler applicable for everybody who wants to access this. I think that's the biggest role of technology in it.
So you, of course, have a B2B business and a B2C business. Do you feel like one of those is better suited to drive these outcomes, drive access?
Yeah, I think in both these segments, I think since, I don't even know if people know it or not, India has more than 1,500 examinations. Like in India, if you want to become anything in life, you have to give an exam. Like even if you want to become a school teacher, you still have to give two examinations. So that's the irony. And in some of those categories which are like extremely niche or let's say new age or cyclical, there's an inherent trust on the local infrastructure or the local instructor out there. That is like, these are like regional government exam categories. That is where we have built the entire B2B infrastructure for. For categories which have been there for the last 20 years and people know it, let's say categories like JEE or UPSC, which are well known and their outcomes are well known. And like there is no arbitrage in terms of quality delivered. I think those are the categories where let's say some brands have been essentially able to make space. And when we talk about JEE categories, the brands are not the online ones. Look at the offline brands. They've been there for 20-25 years. So I think we do both of them. And I think access across the board is tougher for the regional and niche examinations because there's so much information arbitrage towards it. On the more popular examinations, the access is not as tough, but affordability becomes tough. So it's a Schrodinger's cat between access and affordability. And I don't think any category in India is essentially able to solve both, which is why different tech players come and solve the gap for that respective category.
Arpit, on the other end of the spectrum, you're running a pure B2B business. Is there an element of outcomes to that, access to that? How do you think about impact in EdTech with your model?
Absolutely. So we are not in the business of directly educating a set of people. So we're not providing education, but we are enabling education at scale. And 3 or 4 serious outcomes that we track whenever we partner with an institution for our solution would be efficiency. We would track productivity gains. We would track cost savings for the institution. We would track access and equity. I think those are the four key metrics that we would track when we get into an engagement. And, I was just, speaking to you about this as well. And we try and also see how soon we can get to these key metrics. So, that's where value gets unlocked for many of our customers. And increasingly, we have seen that the time to value to get to these metrics and the benefits that we accrue to institutions is becoming important in today's EdTech world. So there's a lot of impatience when you buy a solution on part of institutions and they want to get quick returns. And as a company, we have realized that one of the key metrics amongst all this is also the time to value that we track in terms of getting benefits delivered to the institution early and also to the stakeholders, which then also plays in our favor as a business in terms of longer stickiness and LTV, which is much higher.
How do you all, maybe Ryan can start or Mukul, think about geographic focus, right? Because you will have a variety of factors going in. You have a pure play US business almost, a very global business, a pure play India business, and then a mostly India business, right? So there's just a lot going on.
Okay, Mukul's been very generous. Let me start. So we think that education is highly cultural, right? Our central thesis is companies are the new universities. We think that today the best and brightest, especially in tech, is coming out of the top companies. And so all our courses are designed, developed, and delivered by folks who are the who's who at FANG. As an example, the head of Google Analytics is one of our instructors. The head of machine learning at DoorDash is one of our instructors. The guy who built the Facebook Llama model is one of our instructors, right? And so for us, there is a strong cultural nuance. We think that it's very difficult to run a multi-geographic business. Our focus is Bay Area. We think the cultural context there is very large. And maybe over time, the goal will be to take that Bay Area halo or the Bay Area learning globally, right? But I think cultural context is so important in education that I can't see how one company would be able to do this in many, many areas. I think eruditus, emeritus, right? I'm not sure what they like to be called, but they seem to be one company that has done it in multiple geographies. But other than that, I think it's very, very difficult. And we don't think there is a need to do that, right? So I think culture plays a huge, huge role. Thanks.
I think this is so contextual because the relevance and the importance of education and what is education exactly solving for that cohort of users. I think that, and more importantly, actually, I missed out. I've had failed geographic expansions. Like we started in a couple of countries and ultimately decided to wind that down. Thankfully, we never went berserk over it, and we did not lose a lot of money. The single biggest learning for me during those was more than noting about the difference in the cultural context of the the audience on ground. I think it is very hard for a founder to essentially understand two different audiences for whom education might be at different relevance points in their life and also become more relevant at different age points in their life. So I think for a founder to essentially be able to understand the context across multiple geographies, if somebody does it, it's an innate gift. I don't think it is very humanly possible for most people.
That's so, that's so true. I'm Indian. I studied in India. I lived in India. I worked in India. Then I went to the US. We have a US-focused business. We tried launching in India. We tried launching in India last time. We said, we'll experiment. Most of our team is in India. We said, this is going to be very easy. How difficult can this be? We all know India. We're all Indians. A large part of our team is in India. It was completely difficult. I couldn't understand when people would, and I run webinars. When I would run webinars, people would come and the questions they would ask would be completely different, right? It's like, our US customers are from Venus and the Indian customers are from Mars. It is that different. On the B2C side, I think on the B2B side, I don't have as much experience. Maybe Arpit or Gaurav.
I'll just give you without naming any startup here, how do I say, a new gen or a product first founder, if they start building an EdTech solution, whether it's for consumers or B2B, doesn't matter. The first thing that they will invest while they're building their mobile product is to heavily spend on UI. If you go and look at all the successful government test platforms in the country, they have the most rudimentary UI. Like IRCTC is a great, it has probably one of the largest tickets booked across India, across all categories. That is the UI that works. But people will scratch, like that Gen Z founder will start scratching his head that why is my gradient, curved edges, 3D looking UI is not being adopted. And if they don't understand it, they will never hire the right engineers and the designers who can make for this. So that inefficiency stems to the entire company, and then a few years later, you know what will happen.
That's actually a UI that I built. IRCTC, when I was at Accenture, we worked on that, and it's the simplest, most non-sexy, for lack of a better word, UI. So yeah, makes a lot of
But it works. And that's most of what Bharat needs, at least.
On the B2B geographic focus and how we have kind of gone through it, just to add my 2 cents, we are now present in about 25 countries, and we have had obviously hits and misses with our product. But as, I don't think it's any different than a B2C, because ultimately you're selling to people. And at the end of the day, that people context has to be brought in through the cultural sensitivity that has been talked about. In our case, let's say if you're selling a student information system to different universities in different countries, you also have to also know how education gets imparted, what are some of the standards that they have to conform to on a day-to-day basis. So it is very hard. If it is not done right, then it will misfire. There is no doubt about it. Adequate homework is required before entering any new country. I was attending a session in the morning here, and there was talk of having locals lead that foray rather than sending teams from India. And I'm a firm believer in that. As smart as Indians are with our high EQ and IQ, I think there's always that local flavor that needs to be brought in at the time of sale and at the time of presenting the solution. So I think all those challenges we have kind of weathered, gone through, and we are now present in about 25 countries after having learned the cultural sensitivities and also pivoting our product every single time we have gone into a new geography.
I'll add to it. So in our context, though it's 100% B2C, but so we realize that in India itself, if you want to solve for geography, it's a tough problem to crack, right? So we were 100% online, and then we moved offline last year. We created a thesis that if a student has a good academic institute at say 15-20 minutes to his house, he will always go offline or he will go online. So with that thesis, we have opened a first center in Bhopal, and this worked perfectly fine. And we could get a lot of students. Then we moved, we have opened up a center in Lucknow. Same thesis didn't work there, right? So then we moved to Mumbai, we have moved to a lot of, so right now we are in about 26, 27 cities. So we realized that, as what you mentioned, that it's culturally so different within this country to figure out what will work, what will not. So I think, but yeah, one thing which have worked pretty well for us is just going to that city, staying there, understanding that market quite well, and then taking a call. Like a city like Bhopal, which would be about say 25-30 lakh as a population, only one center is able to cater 1,500 students, versus a city like Indore, which is larger than Bhopal, we need to have 2 centers to cater that city. Yeah, so there are some geographic nuances. Better go there, stay, spend time to solve this problem.
One of the emerging theses that I have is that geography has to be thought about differently. And that's what we are trying to drive in the firm, right? We have stopped thinking about geography as countries. We have started to think about this as cities, right? And if you look at big tech, which is where we play, right? We are starting to see that the commonality is more between, let's say, a Bay Area and a Boston and Berlin and a Bombay and a Beijing, right? Versus even between the US. So from a tech perspective, how you define geography is very, very important, right? Big tech has synergies in all parts of the world wherever they go. So we are starting to look at geography like that versus it being constrained by city.
Creating a cluster, that's what we do. So create a cluster which has common traits, and then start building similar more.
I'll give you a
custom.
pragmatic case point about this. India's poorest state has a GDP per capita of around $800 per capita actually. India's richest state, by the way, which people will be surprised, India's richest state is a state called Sikkim. It has upwards of $5,000 per GDP per capita. Now I'm assuming that both families in these two different geographies can only spend some percentage of their earnings on the education. Let's assume that to be the constant. It is impossible that anybody or any company can essentially, let's take an example of, let's say, Bihar or Jharkhand or any of those states. Any company starting to go and take that percentage of a low GDP per capita and yet running an offline center without compromising the student-teacher ratio. So if the company has to run economically, they'll either have to reduce the fee, but they can't because then it's like global parity gets disturbed. Otherwise, they'll have to, they can't increase the OV because the state can't afford that. So for a counter, what they'll do is that they'll screw up the entire student and teacher ratio, which anyway is a negative spiral because when results don't come, that will keep on like screwing your entire brand of like word of mouth or brand equity, whatever you call it. So that is the reason why when like Ryan also said, like geographies also have their own economic constraint as per se. And that is why like these different geographies in India will have to have different models. And online and offline are just modes of delivery with different cost structures associated. So I think more than like in internally what we do at Classplus, and like we have invested in a company called Textbook, like we essentially in the company have a 2x2 grid where like multiple categories are on, let's say, y-axis and multiple geographies are on x-axis. And only the 2x2 space where there is absolutely no competition and we think it's economically viable, will we even try doing something there. Online or offline comes way later into the consideration.
And that's the classical micro-segmentation that is required in EdTech, right? In terms of, similarly, what we have applied to our business is, if you've gone to a country and you have, we sell to colleges, universities, schools, within colleges you will segregate at the level of student numbers, because a student count of 2,000 college behaves differently than a 5,000 student count college than a 10,000. And if you have to sell to EdTech very clearly and very efficiently, I think these micro segments really go a long way.
So to bring it all together, we talked about how you all are different in geographies. We talked about how you all are different in business models. And at the very beginning, when we asked about is EdTech dead, the comment was EdTech capital markets are dead. But you all are also
They're slow.
Slow. You all are also very different in your funding situations, right? Arpit and Gaurav are sort of in the middle, have raised some capital. Interview Kickstart has raised no money, and then Mukul has raised a ton of money from us, Bloom, Tiger. You know, what do you all think is the role of venture capital, private equity in? I'm
going to start because you discussed this, and I have a good friend here who runs Bloom, so he's going to laugh when I say this. As a founder, I'm very clear. And Karthik, you're going to laugh when I say this, dude. The role of a VC and P is very clear. They need to give you a lot of money at really good terms, a lot of secondary, and they have to stop hassling you after that. That is the role of a VC. But on a serious note, I spent 5 years at Axel. I know Karthik very well from Bloom, right? If you look at somebody like him, you look at you guys at GSV, inordinate amount of value that good VCs, I think, bring to the table, right? And that comes from two parts. One is just bringing best-in-class insights from other companies, right? And the second is that experienced VCs have seen this game many times before, right? And so you can kind of pre-warn folks saying, listen, this is what's going to happen. And so I think that is invaluable. On the PE side, Mujtaba, I have a slightly different take. I think PEs are a very interesting play in this market, and especially today, right? The term that was never even talked about 2 years ago, and when we used to tell people we are a profitable EdTech firm and we've been profitable from day zero, our customers are our investors. When we used to say that, people used to just laugh at us. They would be like, what's the point? Now, everything's our profitability. And that's a market in which the PE firms do really well. So I think there is a $1 trillion EdTech company to be built. And if one wants to build a $1 trillion EdTech company, the people who are best placed to do that is Ps. Because they can go on and put together, they could put us all together, right, under one holding company and go to market with that. So I think VCs play a very interesting role in the early stage, helping people, with a lot of knowledge, connects. As you go later, and especially in this environment, I think Ps are really coming to the party.
Thank you guys. We're all out of time. Appreciate you guys doing this.
Thanks, dude.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Have a nice day.